Hello, and welcome to episode 188 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. Today, we celebrate Halloween with some Gothic mysteries. Enjoy.
Ooh.
I'm Ann Dark.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
The definition of a Gothic novel is an English genre of fiction popular in the 18th to early 19th century, characterized by an atmosphere of mystery and horror and having a pseudo-medieval setting. And we have 3 books for you that fit that description perfectly. The first book I have is The Vine Witch, and it is by Luanne G. Smith. It's number 1 in her Vine Witch trilogy. It is published by 47 North Publishers, and it came out in October of 2019. Do you know what a Vine Witch is?
No, I do not.
For centuries in France, the vineyards have been dependent upon the talent of witches. Protect their vineyard and to put spells on the wine to make sweeter grapes.
Okay.
This story starts out in a swamp.
As any story should.
Right. A toad comes out of the swamp. She's chewing on her latest flies and whatever. And all of a sudden she turns into a young woman. And her name is Elena. And Elena has spent the last 7 years living in the swamp as a toad.
Okay.
She was engaged to be married, and right before this happened, she had told her fiancé that she was breaking it off. And then all of a sudden, zap, she's living in a swamp. So she knows who hexed her.
Ah.
And she's out for revenge. She's looking up poison. She's going to find spells. Whatever she can do, she's ready. She's going after this guy. When she gets back to the house that she lived in, the Château Renard, she finds out that her grandmother, who adopted her when she was very small, she's not really her grandmother. She raised her from childhood and taught her all the spells and magic you need to be a vine witch. When she comes back, her grandmother has sold the vineyard to a man named Jean-Paul Martel. Now, he's very science-driven. He's trying to figure out ways to make a perfect wine. But Elena and her grandmother know it's the witches. But he forbids any witchcraft. Now, how do you get around that? He owns the vineyard. It's a very interesting play. The man she was engaged to that put her in the hex, he's very happily married to a woman, and she is a German witch called a beer hexer. She hexes beer processing instead of wine.
Well, I'm glad to see they all have jobs.
Yeah, of course, there's a murder.
We are a mystery book club,
knew that.
so...
Of course, Elena is blamed. She's a witch, after all. And the murder has trademarks of a magical killing. So she goes on the run. This story, it's got a little romance. It's got some comedy. It's got some horror. It's got some mystery. It's just a good combination of themes in one book. There's an ending that makes you want to make sure you read the next book. The second book in this series is called The Glamourist. The book 3 is called The Conjurer. These are very good books. I recommend them. It's a little fantasy and a little horror and a little mystery. It's the true definition of a goth. Luanne G. Smith's website is luannegsmith.com.
Sounds like a good one. I love a good creepy story. Well, my book is called The Witch of Willow Hall, and it is by Hester Fox. It was published by Graydon House, and it came out October 2nd of 2018. In the wake of a scandal, the Montrose family and their 3 daughters, Catherine, Lydia, and Emmeline, flee Boston for their new country home, Willow Hall. The estate seems sleepy and idyllic, but a subtle menace creeps into the atmosphere. Remnants of a dark history that calls to Lydia and to the youngest, Emmeline. All 3 daughters will be irrevocably changed by what follows, but none more than Lydia, who must draw on a power she never knew she possessed if she wants to protect those she loves, for Willow Hall's secrets will rise in the end.
Sounds good.
This is the epitome of a Gothic. But I will say this. This book came in around 400 pages, and about the first 200 pages, it could have been a historical fiction book. There wasn't a whole lot going on other than the scandal that brought them to Willow Hall, that made them flee Boston. I'm not going to tell you what that is.
No, is Willow Hall a place?
It's
a town?
No. Willow Hall is the estate.
All right, gotcha.
As the story progresses, Emmeline, who's the youngest sibling, becomes fascinated with mermaids. And she's convinced that there are mermaids that live in the pond on the estate. And she's always asking people to take her to the pond to help her find the mermaids. Well, one night, Emmeline goes out on her own and she's found drowned in the pond. It was very sad. And that's when the story starts to pick up. Our protagonist is Lydia. And Lydia starts to see Emmeline as an apparition and starts to talk to her about what happened. And she's almost happy that she can see her because she was very close with Emmeline. Not so much with Catherine. Catherine's a whole nother story. Well, then all of a sudden, this Mary Preston shows up, who is the witch who, from back when the Salem witch trials.
Oh.
She is talking to Lydia, telling Lydia that she is related to her and that Lydia possesses powers. And Lydia's like, well, why me? Why not my sister Catherine, who's the oldest? So she's got her sister, who's showing up, and then she's got Mary Preston, the ghost, who's very decrepit and she doesn't have any lips.
Witchy looking.
She's in really rough shape. Also, you learn as the story goes on that Lydia kind of knew she had powers, but she denied them. Apparently, when she was a child, she got into an argument with a boy who lived on her street, and she, without touching him, broke his leg.
As you will.
Yeah, she will. She has that going on, and then there's a gentleman that lives right near their estate, and he takes a fancy to Lydia, but he's got a dark past too. His mother and brother had died in a horrific fire. Come to find out, this gentleman had something to do with it, but he was just a boy. Then she starts seeing the young brother of his as an apparition also. So we've got ghosts, we've got witches, we've got strange deaths. It is just rife with gothicness, if that's a word.
It's dark.
But Lydia's sister, Catherine, she's a busybody, know-it-all, thinks that she's kind of a socialite. At least that's what she wants to be. She's pregnant. Come to find out, the pregnancy's from incest. From a distant brother. Like I said, this book has everything. The first part of the story was a little sleepy, but man, it made up for it in the second half. Well, that's where I'm going to leave you with this because I really don't want to give away too much of the story because I really hope you read it.
In other words, if you tell me any more, it's going to reflect.
These are things, when you're reading a story, especially something like this, You want those little surprises. You want the aha moments. And if I tell you what all the aha moments are, it won't have the same effect. For the review of it, I would say I would definitely read more from Hester Fox. I did look, and it seems she writes a lot of books that are under this genre, but I didn't see any series. A lot of them have a witch-type theme, but they don't go together. I would love for this story to go on, but it doesn't look like that's probably going to happen since it was written in 2018.
Should have been a new one.
Yeah, there would have been a
out.
new one by now. So there you go. I hope you enjoy The Witch of Willow Hall.
Sounds like a winner.
And Hester Fox's website is hesterfox.com.
All right, the third witch book is The Bone Witch.
Okay, we got the Vine Witch, the Bone Witch, and the Witch of Willow Hall.
We got them all covered. The Bone Witch is book one in another trilogy, and it is by Rin Kupeko. It came out in 2018 from Sourcebooks. This is the story of witches, curses, resurrection. It's a fun fantasy. Taya is the protagonist. She is at a funeral for her brother who had passed away at a very young age. All of a sudden, kind of resurrected him in the middle of his funeral.
By accident?
Well, she didn't know she was witch.
Ah, just like my young lady.
When her grandmother passed away, she designated Taya as the Bone Witch who would take over for her. A Bone Witch is somebody who reads bones. They hold a lot of power. When Taya is made the Bone Witch, her aunt, who was, I guess, her mother's sister, she was furious. She wanted her child to be the Bone Witch. And she's furious. She comes and she ransacks her house, trying to find the Grimoire, the book of spells. Tia and Fox basically chase her off. The most powerful Bone Witch is called an Asha.
I've heard that term before.
Taya has to learn how to be an Asha. She travels and meets Michaela to train her to become an Asha. This book is actually two books in one. It is the story of young Taya, who is trying to figure out what she's doing, where she's going, and how to get there. And then you have this second part of the story where she is older and wiser. But she gets into some real pickles. She's working very hard and she's suffered a lot. Now she's telling her story of her past to a traveling bard or poet. He's the one who's telling the story of Elena. But the two stories are together. If you ever read The Memoir of a Geisha,
Which I did.
when I was reading the reviews of this book, they all mentioned The Memoir of a Geisha. It had that vibe in the training. It was very well done. The wording in this book is very rich and detailed, and it's really beautifully told. I'm looking forward to reading all three in the series. The second one is called The Heart Forger. The third one is called Shadow Glass. Rin Kupeko's website for information is rinkupeko, CHUPECO.com. Well, that gives you three fascinating stories. They're a little spooky for Halloween, and they're a little medieval. I think you're going to enjoy them.
We've been having some very sunny weather here in
Yeah,
Maryland.
it's almost back to summer.
And it was a little hard to get into. I was reading on my deck and wait a minute, this is not right. I want it to be stormy. So,
Dark and stormy. If you have a thunderstorm in your area, go curl up in the corner and read this book. You really need
all
a little...
three of these books.
Yes, you really need that little vibe going on. You don't want sunny, bright. It's not a beach read. None of these are. I hope you'll take our recommendations and check these books out. Trivia. Last week's question was, Mystery author Robert Bruce Montgomery was more famous for